All right. Wonderful. Well, look, it's really good to get the admin out of the way, I think, before any workshop. And I'm glad we did that. We're going through some changes in the system, so this is very good. Yeah, it's a good way of introducing it. So thank you very much, Myla and Doug, on that note. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Zainab Alquero. I'm the Executive Director of the Global Chamber London Metro and founder of Zulk Consultancy, where I work at the intersection of international businesses, strategy, leadership, consulting, and particularly UK GCC relations within the executive advisory sector. And a large part of my work today focuses on helping leaders, founders, and organizations navigate growth, leadership, communication, and international expansion in increasingly high pressure and fast moving environments. Which is exactly why today's conversation is so relevant. No matter how strong the strategy, expertise, or opportunity is, if we cannot communicate with clarity, confidence, and influence under pressure, we often lose the room before the message even lands. Now, executive presence is no longer simply a soft skill. It directly impacts trusts, credibility, leadership influence, commercial outcomes, and ultimately growth. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome today's guest speaker, Mark de Stadler. I'm going to give a quick intro about Mark, and then I'm going to give you the floor, Mark. He's the founder of C4S Global and works with senior leaders, consultants, founders, and commercial teams on executive communication, influence, and presence under pressure. His work focuses heavily on helping professionals communicate with greater authority, strategic clarity, and confidence in high stakes business environments. Mark, we're delighted to have you with us today.
Good afternoon, everybody. Zainab, thank you so much for that intro. I really do appreciate the opportunity to also kind of connect with you today and share some insights and thoughts around how we can be more effective in the world that we're operating in. A little bit of background history with myself. I started in the communication industry close to 15 years ago. I worked with Dale Carnegie for 10 years, where I was a global trainer and consultant. And during that time, I was able to really develop my capability with working with organizations across the globe. COVID happens, the world ends, no more training. What happened? Well, at that point, I recognized there was something missing in the world of development. And that something was the ability to support senior people to thrive in high stakes environments. And we fundamentally look to couple in executive presence as the kind of key angle. Why executive presence? Well, the reality is, for many of us, we come from technical backgrounds, and as a result, we get promoted into opportunities, and then we find ourselves in senior meetings, and we there and being asked to sell our ideas. And for many of us, there's something called glossophobia. 78% of the world's population suffers from glossophobia. And do you know what glossophobia is? Is being the center of attention and how it creates a lot of stress. So, there's that old adage of people would rather be in the coffin than having to deliver the eulogy for the person who's just passed away because of the stress response, right? So, what does that say? For many of us, the next evolution of our success is no longer about developing our technical competence. I'm sure if I spoke to many of you and looked at your technical competence, it would be described as 10 out of 10. But for many of us, where the Achilles heel or the missing link is when we're communicating, does our executive communication match that technical competence? And the challenge is that's where the gap lies. So, as an organization, we've been going out there and helping individuals as well as teams close the gap between their technical competence and their executive communication capability. And when those two things are aligned, people then perceive you as a highly effective, trusted advisor, which then fundamentally allows you to deliver your communication or your product in the most effective way. So let's kind of tap into what this program and what it is we're all about today. So let me just quickly share my slides. So
Amazing. I'm just going to just jump in here quickly, Mark, just to
please
say
do.
that I am sure we're going to have some questions. So I'm just going to advise everybody that if you have got any questions, to put them in the chat box. And towards the end of this presentation and workshop and conversation, we're going to do some Q&As. So please do feel free to put your questions as you think of them as Mark is speaking. Anything that comes up really in relevance to this, and then we'll go through at the end. And yes, I'm excited for you to kick us off, Mark, and tell us about the foundation of today's discussion.
Right. So I'm sure if you look at the slide, many of you have potentially felt this feeling and had this conversation in your head going, I promise you it went way better. And the reality is you've walked away from that situation thinking I had all the content, I'd prepared accordingly, but it didn't seem to land the way I had imagined in my head. And for many of us, we're going to try and help give you some tips and insights around how you can change. I swear that sounded much better in my head too. I absolutely smashed it out of the park. I was the best version of myself in a high, intense pressure situation. So, here's the reality. For many of us, it's all great that we're reading books and we're watching YouTube clips and we're looking at Obama and we're looking at all these great orators and we go, great, I will just do what they're doing. I'll read the books and then I'll go into this meeting and I'm going to deliver a powerful presentation. Then pressure builds. Suddenly, your brain, which generally is trying to keep you safe, your brain's not hardwired to make you happy, it's hardwired to keep you safe. Your brain goes, Mark, I don't think this is a good idea for you to try something new in a high pressure situation because what's at stake? Your reputation is at stake. You might screw it up. In actual fact, are you really effectively prepared? What does the brain do? It immediately gives a strong signal. Don't do it, and you revert to type. And unfortunately, that revert to type is an individual that is not as impactful, authoritative, and as powerful as they can be. And that's what we're looking to help unpack today. So here's the kicker. People assume that executive presence is a nice to have. Some people seem to just have it, and others are born with it. But the question is, well, I don't really know how to develop it. And that was fundamentally the question that myself and my co-founder and wife decided to answer for all of our clients is how do we develop executive presence? And here's the kicker. When we don't have executive presence, impact dies, deal stalls, decision makers hesitate to buy into ideas. Authority drops. But the thing is when we have it, we fundamentally become a highly important individual that can drive success, not only if we're running our own business, but fundamentally if we're trying to drive change and new initiatives and getting people to buy into the value that you're delivering. So it is 100% a key skill set for success. So, Mark, and all of you are thinking, what is executive presence? So, as I pose this question to you, I want you to just take 30 seconds in your head and ask yourself, what is executive presence? Think of somebody that you look up to and you go, yeah, if they have executive presence, what do they have? And there was research that went out in 2012 where they asked over 1,500 managers this exact question, what is executive presence? And what did they say? This is what the results came up with, right? It's confidence, it's being decisive, it's commanding, the person's polished, they're convincing, they're bold. Well, the reality is that's all fine and dandy that we know what it looks like. How the hell do we develop it? Come on, Zainab, just be more confident, just be more decisive, right? Anne Marie, just be more polished. The problem is, it's all fine and dandy to say, I need to be all these things. The question is, how do I develop the capability to achieve and show up with executive presence? So, drum roll. Brrr. Here you go, ladies and gentlemen. Here are the four key pillars to executive presence. Now, when you look at these four key pillars, I'm sure that there's a particular pillar that you look at and you think, you know what? I've got a lot of competency in this one particular pillar. But there might be a particular pillar for you where you think, you know what? That's probably the one key area that's currently holding me back. Now, when we generally went out to the market and asked these questions around where do people spend their time, where are they trying to develop from an executive presence perspective, which pillar do you think they chose? I know you're thinking about in your head. And the simple answer is it's number three. Most people put all their focus on intention around the whole presenting. How do I show up powerfully? How do I tell stories? How do I facilitate? How do I influence individuals? Because generally, area number two is where people generally feel the most competence. My ability to build relationships, or it's number four, my strategic value. But, ladies and gentlemen, the foundation of executive presence is pillar number one. And it's the one pillar that probably 98% of the world's population is not spending the correct time on and being able to develop. I can give you all the frameworks. I can teach you how to be a master storyteller. But if I throw you up on stage in front of 500 senior people and you haven't been able to master your mindset, I don't care who you are, but you're going to go up on stage and you're going to go into a complete survival mode experience. And ladies and gentlemen, executive presence and operating with a survival mindset do not go hand in hand. You cannot be living from a survival place and think that you're showing up with executive presence. So the reality is, if there's one thing I want you to take away from today's session is you've got to realize you've got to start to put the work in terms of mastering your mindset. Now, I don't mean that you need to be happier and you need to walk around with a skip in your step. What I mean about mastering your mindset is overcoming things like imposter syndrome, perfectionism. It's about overcoming your preparation. Too many times I work with organizations, and when I initially go in, I go, so guys, take me through your current preparation when it comes to being able to operate successfully in high stakes environments. And oh my goodness, these incredible PowerPoint slides that they've spent weeks and weeks putting together. And then I ask a simple question, great. Have you actually prepared the delivery of those slides? Have you practiced saying the words? Have you practiced the visualization and the delivery of those words? Have you looked at visualization in terms of your mental prep for this actual presentation? What do I get? Tumbleweed and silence of the lambs. Absolute little silence. Why? Because nobody is doing and taking that approach. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the difference between people who show up with executive presence and individuals who are just in pure survival mode and trying to get through these high pressure situations. One is going to thrive and the other one is there to survive. So I'm going to unpack the first pillar and give you some tips. One of the things that we've got to start to get ourselves really educated on is the concept of visualization. Elite sports has for many, many years been applying visualization techniques so that when they come to the big pressure moment, they not only just get through it, but they are the best version of themselves on the biggest stage when the pressure is at its highest. You look at the world's elite sports men and women out there, and you will quickly see they all say the same things before the actual event. They'll go for an interview and they'll go, so, Cristiano, what's your current feeling towards tomorrow's final? I'm going to absolutely dominate. I'm going to walk in there and be the best version, and we're going to win this game. And then they go, well, tell us about how you're feeling. Well, I've prepared effectively. I've been making sure that I've been preparing in the best possible way. I've ate well, I've slept well, I've done some visualization, and fundamentally, I am now ready to thrive in this high pressure situation. So, here's four things I want you to begin to consider when it comes to your visualization game. Number one, run the room mentally. What do we mean by that? We want you to visualize the first 60 seconds. Imagine if you're having to deliver a keynote at one of your organization functions. I want you to imagine how that 60 seconds is going to go, but I want you to imagine it going it as best as possible. Your first 60 seconds is probably the best 60 seconds you've ever had as you've walked up on stage. You're walking up with confidence, you're looking around the room with a massive smile, your notes are all aligned, your slides are working perfectly, your microphone is all set up, and you say the first three sentences, and they come out crystal clear, powerful, and authoritative. And I want you to really start to feel about those things. Then the second thing, what many people they go, okay, that's it, visualization done. No, ladies and gentlemen, the world is not as easy as that. No, nothing goes to plan. So what we have to start to do is we've got to start to also, through our visualization work, thinking about what happens when we are thrown under the bus, when the microphone doesn't work, or the slides don't turn on, or your clicker, the battery's dead. Or, in actual fact, they start to give you a handheld microphone and you didn't prepare for that. So, one of the things you have to bring a part of your visualization is start to think about potential challenges and quagmires that might come up. So that when they do happen, instead of you having a complete panic attack, and basically losing all control of your motor neuron skills and your ability to talk, you basically just bump off them. And you've seen that some people, something will happen. You go, how the hell did that person manage that situation? It's because their mental visualization work had involved things going wrong and how they were going to adjust. The other thing is we always say use environmental anchors. Picture the room setup. Understand the layout. Are people sitting at round tables? Are people sitting in an auditorium style? And start to ask yourself, how am I going to engage with them? Am I going to get them to turn to the partner next to you? Are you going to try and identify somebody at the table to kind of be a leader of the table discussion? I don't know, but these things you need to rehearse and begin to recover. Make sure that your visualization is incorporating both the positive, both challenges, and the environmental factors. When we start to do this, ladies and gentlemen, we start to prepare like elite sports people. And that's going to give us the best opportunity to thrive under pressure rather than just to survive. Okay. So there's your first little bit of golden nuggets around the mindset piece and what we need to do.
There is so much food
Secondly,
for thought here for me. I just have to say, Mark. I mean, I'm just thinking about the visualization on its own. And I would love to understand so much more about that. And I'm going to hold my question to the end, but I'm already visualizing how potential situations can go wrong and then rehearsing what you would do about it. Essentially, that's what you're saying. You've got to rehearse what you're going to do about what's your reaction going to be
exactly,
in case something goes wrong. Now, there's a
goes
whole
wrong.
other aspect of manifestation here, which we only want to do positively in, but this is also something that works.
We've got to prepare for the unpreparable. We got to think about things aren't going to work because, like I said, if your preparation is only focused on things going perfectly, the minute something derails you, your body will go into a significant stress response, and then you'll immediately go into what I would describe complete flight or fight mode. Right. And that's where the cortisol is going to overwhelm you. I've seen leaders lose the ability to talk. They're just staring into the void, and everyone's like, oh God, we've lost Trevor. You know what I mean? What's happened? And that's fundamentally because the amount of cortisol and stress that has gone through their body, the body goes into two responses. Either we're going to fight it out, or we run away, or the worst case scenario is it goes into freeze mode. And that's where the body is basically saying, let's pretend that nobody's here and maybe they won't notice us. Unfortunately, when you're in a senior meeting or on stage, you can't really hide behind the bush and stay quiet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that happened to me on one of the most important stages of my life where I completely completely froze. I
Yeah.
recovered, but I'll tell that story another time. Anyway,
And
you
I'm
go
sure,
ahead.
Zainab, it probably took you many years to overcome that initial stress response just through having positive experiences so you could balance it out. And sometimes we've had one of those really tough responses early in our careers. Sometimes when we were like 12, 14 during an essay at school, and then the whole class laughed at us. And then we're still carrying all of that baggage with us every time we have to go up. And the body's like, well, guess what? The last time we did this, it didn't go very well. So when you're walking up to do the actual presentation, your body's already going into flight response. That's
Mm,
why we've got to start to work on the mindset piece beforehand and start to cultivate a more resilient way of operating in high pressure situations.
interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. There's more that I could share on it, but fundamentally, another thing that we really talk about is also setting out a very clear goal around what you want to achieve from a meeting. Too many times we're just going into the meeting and then just going with the flow because we've got so much experience. We actively talk about our clients setting very clear goals. So, as a result of this meeting, I want people to not only engage with us and understand the value of our proposition, but I'd like to walk away with a very clear next step. And that next step should be a meeting within the next 4 weeks. Because too many times people walk away from the experience and then they'll go, so what's the result? Well, I don't know, I survived. Yeah, but from a no, and they've missed out on the business context and the business perspective. So make sure you set clear goals and make sure you're applying the visualization techniques because that's going to give you the best opportunity to thrive, not survive. Then we talk about relationship influence. Now, many people will actively talk about, I'm great at building relationships. The research shows women are incredible at building relationships, but those relationships tend to be personal conversations, finding out about kids, travel, what people are doing. But what we talk about relationship influence is it's taking it to a business context. So what we've seen, especially from a networking perspective, is people are very good at understanding their personal relationships, but they're very bad at asking for advice, asking for support, and more importantly, seeing if people are willing to recommend them or offer them intros into other organizations. So if you want to really take your relationship influence to the next game, here's the next bit of insights that I want to share. Ladies and gentlemen, there is something called stakeholder mapping. Now, if you've ever been in any form of commercial team or anything like that, they've asked you map out your clients, find out who they are. But when I'm talking about stakeholder mapping, I mean this from more of an internal perspective. Too many times people are going into meetings and there are, say, let's for example say there's between 4 and 8 senior decision makers who are in the room. None of those senior decision makers have actually spoken to you before that meeting. And what it means is you have to now go into that meeting cold. And that is a very frightening and that is a very daunting experience. Now, if you were a smart individual who understood the power of executive presence and influence, you would have started to map out those key decision makers. And before that meeting, which is in 2 weeks' time, you would have reached out to some of these individuals to get their consensus and to get their buy-in. Now, let's use Zainab as a person I wanted to influence. So what I would do is I would meet with Zainab beforehand. And I did this. For example, for this session that I ran, I spent 45 minutes with Zainab yesterday going through my slides, getting buy-in, making sure we were aligned. So by the time it came to me delivering the session, I knew I already had a massive advocate of what I was about to share, and she was able to alleviate any stress and worry about the direction and the content I was sharing. So just the singular conversation increased my confidence, and it also basically meant that I probably had somebody who's now a massive advocate for me in the room. Now, if we had to make this more of a business meeting, I would have gone, Zainab, if I had to deliver this information, would you support this initiative? And you might go, hell yeah. So I know before I needed four people to give me consensus, I've already got one before the meeting started. But I don't just stop at Zainab. I then go to the finance director and I go, hey, listen, Kevin, I wonder if I can grab 5 minutes with you. I'm having to present next week's numbers on this new project. I've never been great at getting my finances on point from a business perspective. Is there any way that I can just grab you for 5 minutes and walk you through what I've currently got? And hopefully you can help maybe just give some tips and insights around what adjustments I could make. So what happens is I now start to connect with Kevin. I start to take him through the journey of what I'm thinking. Kevin gives me some insights and pointers. I make those adjustments, and maybe 2 days before the event, I send over the new numbers and I ask for Kevin to give me some further feedback. Kevin goes, Mark, to be honest, I think your numbers are now far more effective and they seem to be far more on point. Great. So, what happens now? I know I've got Zainab on my side. Guess what? I now have Kevin on my side. So I'm only down to two more senior directors who I now need to go in and be influential with. I've already got 50% of the group bought into my idea. So, what is that going to do from how I'm feeling? Number one, my confidence is going to increase exponentially. Number two, I've already got two advocates who I know are going to support me. And number three, I know that what I'm presenting is speaking to the business case. So, my chances of this concept, idea, or project being given the green light has increased exponentially by me applying stakeholder mapping and engaging with people beforehand. Guys, I always say to my clients, all decisions in the boardroom are made outside of them. Stop going in cold and thinking that somehow you're going to be a jester and you're able to convince a finance, an operations, an MD. Those are three or four very different types of stakeholders who require information in very different types of ways. So why would you try and be everything to everybody rather than you try and be one or two things to key individuals? You start to think like that, you start to be proactive in your stakeholder engagement, and you will start to increase your influence in the boardroom. And I think this is really where people have a lot of challenges is they promoted into roles and they walk into these rooms and they are passive. They're like, well, listen, I don't want to say anything stupid. I don't want to come across like I don't know what I'm doing. And I sure as I don't want to tell the whole world that I'm suffering from significant imposter syndrome at this significant point. So they literally just sit still and observe. But that's the problem. If you are not actively involved, if you're not sharing your opinion, you are slowly having your name crossed out for a future promotion and for the ability to raise your profile. Active participation is key, but the way that you can build confidence is all about your participation outside the boardroom and with those boardroom members. Start to really do some stakeholder mapping, start to engage with them, start to understand how they need message to be packaged. And when you start to do that, you will feel confident and they will perceive you as somebody who has a place and a seat at the table. Okay. Any questions, Zainab, that's coming through your mind, or should we
I
move
mean,
on?
I am taking in everything that you're saying and applying it in real life. And certainly, I feel that a lot of what you're saying is genuinely to do with not only our mindset, but it's also our biology, how we show up physically. And I don't mean in the polished way. What I mean is, how is our nervous system showing up for us? You know,
100%.
what signals are we broadcasting here? So it's not a question really, but more of a statement aligning with what you're saying. And I will save the questions till the end when you're ready, unless you're ready to receive some questions now, Mark.
Roberto, I know you've put your hand up, so let's maybe just take your question and then we'll kind of
Oh, I
move on
didn't
from
see
there.
that. All right, yes, let's go.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. By the way, thank you for being here today. I'm actually here in Western United States, and I'm originally from Florence in Italy, but I've been here for
Right.
tons of years. And while my background is science, I have been working in behavioral responses and modifications for the last 45, 50 years. So what you're saying is just music to my ear. The
Right.
thing that I would have liked to know, what is your experience? Visualization is a technique that has been used for years
Yeah.
in the field of sports and everything else. But what did you find out in your experience? How many time do you need to visualize an event and before that becomes morphs into reality? And how do you actually get to an effective visualization? If there's what kind of meditation techniques do you provide before you become effective in your messaging?
I
Well,
think to answer your question simply is this is it all depends around where your mental state is. If you're somebody who already has a lot of confidence in your competence, the amount of visualization in your work doesn't need to be hours. It could be minutes. But if you're somebody who's suffering from a significant amount of imposter syndrome and self-doubt, then you've got to put in the reps. It's like go to the gym. If I'm already got a half decent physique, then I don't need to go to the gym 6 times a week. But if I'm sitting in a situation where I've been inactive for 2 years, if I'm going to start to feel competent, then I've got to put in the reps. So that's the first thing that I would say from what is the right amount of time. I do believe that if anything, it is very specific from an individual level. I think from a meditation perspective, I think those experiences really depend on your relationship with meditation. Breath work and meditation, from my perspective, is very important because as Zaydeb has described, we're talking about regulating our nervous system. And when we're able to regulate our nervous system, that's the point when we're able to thrive in high pressure situations. You know, a lot of people talk about having BMT, big match temperament. I've been very lucky enough when I've looked at my entire journey in life, my body thrives in big moments. For some reason, I seem to find the ability to micro focus and to have just this innate self-belief. And look, I'm just very blessed that that's just how I grew up. But when I talk to my clients and 99% of the world's population, they unfortunately do not have that type of hardwiring. So I think it really is at an individual level. But I would say is number one, we've got to incorporate visualization, breath work, meditation, setting goals, all of the above are all part of the wider journey to be able to succeed in key moments.
yeah. And it's not one answer for all,
No.
as you've said. It's definitely a combination of that. Thank you so much, Roberto, for your question. And I didn't see your hand there, so I'll make sure I keep an eye out on
No
that.
problem. See, the thing that we found out here is that different culture have different responses. But
Yes.
what we found out is that typically, so let's talk about advertising and messaging. You don't see a message until you've seen 5 impressions of the same message within a certain amount of time, regardless of cultures, regardless of education and background. So in our experience, a 20 minutes daily meditation and a visualization at least of 4 to 5 to 6 times is really important before you actually start acting that into reality and you don't get
Yeah.
confused.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
look, we've got to certainly get away from these 1 minute, 5 minute
Yeah.
experiences. They really do not have the amount of impact on our mindset and nervous system to thrive in pressure. That's just kind of just a daily function rather than functioning at higher levels for sure.
Yeah. Thank you,
Okay, I'll get
Roberto.
cracking. I'll continue because I know my time's short and
Go
I
for
need
it.
a lot to share.
We've
So
got we've got about a good 15 minutes, and then we'll include in those. So I'll say another 10 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&As towards the end. How's that for
great.
you?
So the next piece of insight that I want to share with you is what I would describe as 95% of the world's population are oversharers. So what's happening is they're going into senior meetings and they're like, okay, well, listen, I need to show these senior people how much I know. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show them how I've come to my conclusion that I'm going to share today. And what they do is they start pulling out all of their Excel spreadsheets and senior people fall asleep. We've got to realize that if you want to become more powerful in senior meetings, it's not more information, it's not complexity, it's not jargon. It's short, it's sharp, it's to the point. So, one of the things that we always talk about on our executive presence programs that we run both across the globe and here in London is this is our authority amplifier. It's three things we want you to think about. because it keeps it simple. Number one, don't lead with the context, lead with the problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, bosses in the room, we've identified that there is a 20% reduction that we can make from an operational perspective. And what we think is that 20% reduction over a 12-month period could save our organization close to 1.5 million pounds over the next 12 months. And over the next 5 minutes, I'm going to share with you how we came to this conclusion. When you start to package your message with lead with the problem and then frame it from a commercial perspective, senior decision makers get absolutely giddy. They're like, oh my God, where has this person been all my life? Because that's what they want. One of the things we have to realize from a psychology perspective is something called cognitive load. And what cognitive load tells us is people do not, our brains do not like to have to deal with complex things all the time. They want things to be easy. They want to be able to make decisions fast. And if you're a senior person now, you would probably recognize you are constantly in meetings, one team meeting, one Zoom meeting after another. And then finally you get to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And this is a meeting where you have a whole bunch of your subordinates trying to present updates on what's going on. And what do? They bore you to death with all the context and all the background information where you just want to say, for the love of God, just tell me what the problem is and how much is it going to cost. Well, guess what? Your ability to be more influential upwards is all about commercial framing and grabbing senior people's attention. And the best way you can grab their attention is opening with leading with the problem. And then you give the commercials because they can see how much this is going to cost. And now what you have is you've stopped people typing on their phones, engaging in other things, and immediately you've probably got 95% of those senior leaders listening to what you're about to say. Too many times people open, and in the first 1 minute, they've lost the entire room already. So by you utilizing this authority amplifier process, you will start to show up more powerfully in the meetings you find yourself in. Right. Visual and vocal presence. This is the third pillar. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this is I would describe is your visual presence gets you in the room. Your vocal presence is what keeps you there and keeps people engaged. Too many times we're putting too much emphasis on how we look, when the reality is you can look like $1 million, but if you talk like somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, I don't give a damn how you look, you will lose credibility. And for many of us, our biggest challenge is when we're communicating, we're not communicating with authority. There are 5 vocal foundations that we need to start to become aware of. But I'm not going to go into detail of that because, like I said, we could go in, we don't have enough time. But what I really want to talk to you today about is storytelling. Now, facts tell, stories sell. You've probably heard this statement before, but when we started to develop this not only just the program, but what we were as an organization, I spent a significant amount of time and research around storytelling. And here's some things that I want to share with you. Number one, when we share facts alone, it only lights up the language parts of our brain associated with language. Sorry. When we tell stories, our brains literally light up like it's Guy Fawkes, like it's Chinese New Year. Why? Why is it that our brains are so hardwired for storytelling? Well, let's take ourselves back 150,000 years ago, and we're all chilling around the fire, and we have our main senior person, the oracle, who sits there and they're telling stories and they talk about the story. And while this person's telling a story, I'm not really concentrating. I'm messing about with a stick or a stone. And they mention something important about the blue pill and the red pill, or the blueberry and the red berry, right? I didn't focus. I wasn't listening. What happened? I get to the bush, and there's 2 bushes, one with red berries, one with blueberries. And I decide to go for the bush with blueberries. What happens? I die because I wasn't listening. So fundamentally, that hasn't changed. Our brains, when we hear storytelling and we hear people utilizing emotional language, our brains immediately go, listen here, something important is potentially coming. So as a result, we take up memory space because when there's more wires firing and wiring in our brains, we're taking up more memory space, which makes us more memorable. So instead of you going out there and sharing all the facts about all this research that you've done, start with a story because the story is going to grab people and they're going to make you more memorable. Now, the question is, how long should a story be? Now, for many of us who think we're living in a TikTok world, they'll be telling me 30 seconds. The reality is, the research shows your story should be no more than 2 to 3 minutes long. That's it. If you start talking longer than 2 to 3 minutes, individuals in the room will start to be going, Zainab, where is the story going? I don't really know what the story is all about. So the sweet spot is 2 to 3 minutes in terms of your story. Now, let's look at this. I'm going to share a very powerful storytelling framework that we share on all of our programs, especially for senior leaders. And this is the framework and how it works. Is one thing our brains don't like is unresolved experiences. So think about your Netflix series that you're watching. And what happens when it comes to the end of the episode? They leave you on a cliffhanger. Why? Because our brains don't like unresolved situations. So what does it do? You click and you watch the next episode, even though it's 11:45 at night and you're thinking, I need to go to bed. They've hooked you in. So we've got to realize that if you want to be more powerful from a storytelling perspective, it's about following, not only just setting the context, but the tension. It creates the interest in individuals. And then you share the insight and the action. So I'm going to give you a bit of an example, right? Context. I had a senior group of FM senior leaders going out there trying to win business. And they'd done all the right preparation. Their slide deck was client centric, their value proposition was extremely powerful. And they went in and they all got together and they delivered the information. 10 minutes into the presentation, the energy drops. There's loads of disengagement. All the senior leaders that they're supposed to be selling, the senior decision makers are looking at their phones. Finally, one of the senior leaders goes, guys, I just don't understand what is your value. And at this point, the stress response in all those who are pitching for the business goes through the roof. And as a result, they start to overshare. As a result, they increased their speech rate. As a result, their breath started to increase and they lost authority. Now, here's the insight. Most people assume that executive presence is about being charismatic. Executive presence isn't about being charismatic. It's about your ability to create confidence in the room. That's really what it is. And so, and I'm using this as an example. So over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to be sharing some tips, hacks, and insights around how you can show up more powerfully from an executive presence perspective. So there I've kind of just used the formula on how you can piece your stories all together. But there's a number of frameworks that we teach people dependent on the environment and the situation they find themselves in. But I just want to make it clear, guys, it's not that your story has to be this incredible lived experience. Too many people go, well, Mark, my life's not very interesting. I haven't climbed Mount Everest or swam through the River Thames. It's not that your story needs to be exciting. If anything, the research shows that the more mundane, the more normal your experience is, the greater the level of engagement because everybody can relate to the experience that you're talking about. The problem is your delivery. And therein lies the challenge is when people are telling stories, oh my God, it is boring as hell because their delivery, their vocal, their visual presence, the way that they're showing enthusiasm is not matched. And this is something that came up. There was a communication researcher called Dr. Albert Moravian, and he researched communication for 30 years. And he talked about something called congruency. And I'm just going to give you an example of congruency. So I'm going to say all the right words, but have a look at my body language and have a listen to my tone. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just super excited to be here. I think you're an incredible bunch of humans who have so much potential. And when we come together, I believe we can achieve the most fantastic and incredible things that are out there. And you know what? It's an honor to be here. Now, I'm saying all the right things. I've prepped all the right words, but unfortunately, when I deliver those words, my mouth, my voice, and my body language are not aligned. And us as human beings, we're hardwired for nonverbal cues. So when we notice these nonverbal cues are not aligning and there's a mismatch, what does our brain do? Liar, liar, pants and fire. That's absolutely talking complete fake information. I don't believe this person for a single word. You've probably had one of those leaders who you've met and he's come into the room and go, you guys are really, you're the most valuable commodity that we have in this organization. And then 2 days later, they fire 50% of you, right? Because you've seen it in your own lives where people are not congruent in how they're communicating. And it plays even a bigger factor when we're telling stories. Okay. Now, I want to take you to this final piece. Well, before we go to that, I want to talk a little bit about Q&A. I don't know how we're doing. Zainab, I told you, keep me online for timing,
I
right?
know. Now I know exactly what you mean. But
Yes.
I think it's such insightful content. We probably have time. I think it's you ought to continue with. You've got two more slides. Is
I'll
that
get to the
right?
last pillar. I'll get to the
I
last pillar, then we can open up for Q&A. Hopefully, we've got
That's
some
right.
questions
I think we'll
that
do
can come
that.
with
So
it. Yeah.
brilliant. So go ahead, and then we'll start the
So
Q&A.
I must admit, when I came across biopsychology principles, and I want to make this clear, bio, not bio, right? Biopsychology principles. It was really a game changer in terms of how to frame my ideas in the most effective way to get buy-in. And one of the things that we always need to start to realize is we've got to start to educate ourselves on biopsychology principles. Guys, there's AI. You type in biopsychology principles and it will break down and give you examples that are related to your job title, to your industry. Just literally type it in, biopsychology. And what they are is it's effective ways for us to not only frame our message, but share information in the most powerful way that allows us as human beings to tick all the necessary boxes so that we feel like we're making a decision that is low risk, high impact, and more importantly, allowing us to see some serious value. So one of the things that we talk about is lead with commercial impact. And this is really from an ability to influence upwards, right? Frame the message around risk, revenue, cost, or operational value. One of the biopsychology principles that exists is called loss aversion. Here's something that's really crazy. People are willing to risk 2 times more to not lose than to gain. So let me repeat myself. People are willing to risk 2 times more to not lose than to gain. So if I was trying to get people to buy into my program and I was like, well, I'm going to help you be more influential in senior places where if I utilize loss aversion, I was going, you are potentially missing out on a promotion. You are potentially missing out on an increase on 20,000 pounds a year. You are potentially throwing away 100,000 pounds a year by not changing your lighting system. That's going to be far more powerful than we believe we can help you be more efficient from an ESG perspective in terms of your lighting. So loss aversion is a very powerful tool on you being able to be more influential in terms of what you're doing. Now,
Thank
they
you
talk
so much,
about
Mark.
social.
Just to give you that last 60 seconds.
Yes. Okay, cool. Questions, ladies and gentlemen.
Good timing. This
Yeah.
wasn't planned. Any questions, anybody? It'll be great to use the most out of Mark's expertise here. So if you've got any questions, please do put your hand up. I certainly have one, but I'm going to give the floor to somebody here. Roberto?
I hate to. This is so exciting. You open up today with my background is I have a degree in physics, one in chemistry, one in computer science. But in the past 40 years, I had my own company, taught MBAs, et cetera, et cetera. The thing that's really interesting is what I found out when I was doing connectivity between engineering or market research and development and marketing and sales. The major challenge that I discovered was that the actual mindset, the selective perception of the people in research technology were so different from the marketing and sale that
Yeah.
when you send the message, the interpretation of the message, the decoding of the message, as we called it in messaging, the decoding of the message was totally different from the engineering research point of view and the marketing and sales point of view. How did you overcome that? Or did you have a specific mantra, a specific conversation, or a pre training to actually get the messaging to be adjusted?
Yeah, great
I
question.
think we've got to speak to so one thing we know is all decisions are made in the emotional part of our brain. Why do we know that? So neuroscientists had individuals who had brain injuries, and the part of their brains that were injured was the amygdala, right? It's called the chimp part or the unconscious part of our brain. And what they recognized and what they saw was some of these individuals were no longer able to make very simple decisions like what were they going to eat for lunch or for breakfast. And so, what it told us from a science perspective is if we want to be more influential, we have to influence people from an emotional perspective. Speak to their emotions, speak to their needs, rather than speaking to the logic side of what they do. And I think when we can start to frame our messages in those way, we will find that we're going to be more impactful and we're going to grab people's attention quicker, better, faster, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Wow.
Mark.
I
Pleasure.
mean, there's so much know-how here. I mean, I did say bring your notepad and pen to take notes, and there's so much to unpack here. Unfortunately, we don't have much longer, but please do get in contact with Mark. Mark, I think have you shared your details? I will certainly share it by email to
I've
all the
got, yeah,
attendees.
I've pretty much put all the slides into a PDF that I'm happy to share, and it's got all my
Brilliant.
details on the side there. So, yeah, I'd
Great.
love to engage with any of you and all of you. You know, as an organization, we do run programs internally for larger organizations, but we also have an open course where single individuals can come on and join our programs in London. We potentially, with the support of the Global Chamber, we're potentially looking at taking our open program to the States and running something out there. The cohorts are small, it's only for about 12 individuals. So if any of you are interested, please let's connect on LinkedIn. But I will share the slides and all my information with Zainab, and she could potentially push it out to all of you who have attended. So thank you all for taking the time to listen, because I know I've been talking quite a lot, but hopefully you've been able to pick up one or two pieces of nuggets that you can begin to apply so that you can thrive in high pressure situations rather than potentially being in that survival mode.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark, truly
Pleasure.
for such a valuable and insightful session today. I think this conversation has really highlighted the executive presence, that executive presence is not about performance or ego. It's really about clarity, trust, confidence, and the ability to communicate value effectively when it really matters the most. And thank you to everyone who joined us today from across the globe, Global Chamber Network. We really appreciate your continued support and participation in the London Metro chapter and our wider global community. Please do continue connecting with one another after today's session, and we will be sharing today's session via email through our team. And we will very much look forward to welcoming many of you to our upcoming Global Chamber London Summer Barbecue on the 11th of
We,
June in
myself and my wife will
Westminster.
be there. So
Yeah.
if there's anybody that's going to be joining, we've literally just looked at our plane tickets. So
Oh,
awesome. So
brilliant.
if any
That
of you are
really
coming,
made me happy to meet you
and
in person.
Zainab,
That's
just
great.
to tell you to confirm, it is the 10th of June, right?
No, it's the 11th of June.
Okay, the 11th of June.
Yeah.
Just to have a look on the chamber, I went onto the website and it was saying the 11th of July there for some reason. So you
Yeah,
might
it
need to just
actually
check up
says
on that.
it says the 10th of July, but we're going to change that. I think Myla and Doug picked that up and I've emailed them
Perfect.
earlier. So thank you for that. But it's the 11th of June in London, in Westminster.
Perfect.
So wishing
We'll see you
everyone
then.
a fantastic rest of the week. And I'm really pleased to see most of you today. And we'll see you again very soon. Take care.
And Zainab, I'll get that
Zainab, thank you
information
so
sent
much
over to you
for
today.
the facilitation. This is the first time that I meet you, but I'll be in touch with you separately. And by the way, Mark, be in touch with us. We've been for 50 years in the field of behavioral changes in the US.
Sounds
So
interesting. Perfect, Roberta.
we'll be glad to
We
introduce you.
will we will definitely reconnect on LinkedIn. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank
Cheers,
you.
Thank you
everybody.
again for today.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.